Wow, that was fantastic. If we could get Frankie Valli out here, we'd have all the Jersey boys. So, couldn't believe it, 2 Jersey guys. What a fantastic set of awards. Couldn't think of 2 more deserving guys than Jack and Anthony. That was fantastic. This morning, we're very fortunate to have my good friend Pete Van Dorpe as our keynote speaker. Pete's an old friend who I've been involved with in several fire behavior studies. Pete and I have spent a lot of time together looking at live burns, looking at wind-driven flame fronts, ventilation techniques, and collapse times. One of the great things about hanging out with Pete is that there is never a dull moment. Pete's one of the most intelligent and engaging firefighters that I have ever had the pleasure of hanging around with. And I've known Pete for a long time. This morning he's going to entertain you, he's going to enlighten you, and he's going to keep you on the edge of your seats. And now for the quick bio. Pete Van Dorpe is a 32-year veteran and director of training for the Chicago Fire Department. He has a bachelor's degree in management from Southern Illinois University. He has addressed modern fireground challenges at FDIC and other venues. In addition to his work as a field instructor for the Illinois Fire Institute, he has been the lead instructor for the Chicago Fire Department's Fire Officer School and teaches building construction for the fire service throughout the city colleges of Chicago. He recently participated as a subject matter expert in Underwriters Laboratory research of structural stability of engineered lumber under fire conditions for the National Standard of Institute of Technologies evaluating firefighting tactics under wind-driven conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you the 2012 keynote speaker, Chief Pete Van Dorpe.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. It really is a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Penwell, Fire Engineering, FDIC, and all the folks that made it possible for me to come here and share some time with you today. Not only did they invite me here and give me this opportunity, they give you a lot of good advice, not the least of which was, right at the very end, they said, when you begin your presentation, make sure you use the whole stage, move around, feel free to do so, but also begin with a few moments at the podium. All right, got that done. Copy that. Mind if I start with a question? I got to pick somebody out. How could you live so long and be so dumb? Really, how could you live so long and be so dumb? All my life growing up, me and my brothers and sisters heard that every time we'd screw up, when we heard it from that man, my father. Right? How could you live so long and be so dumb? I remember about the time I turned 14 or 15, I remember looking at him going, I don't know, Dad, you're the one with 9 kids. Why don't you tell me? And of course, the fact that I'm standing here today is testament that I thought it, I didn't say it. But to this day, every time I screw up, every time I make a mistake, and that's me screwing up, no SCBA, no gloves. I got my chief hat on. I'm on the roof of the porch pulling hose. I don't know who I thought was chief in the fire, but it wasn't me. But I can hear him. I can see him. I can actually feel him. How could you live so long and be so dumb? I tell this story all the time. I tell this story when I'm teaching all the time, and I've always wanted to tell it with my father right there in the front seat. There's his name. And he couldn't be here today, though. And relax, there's no tragedy. My dad wanted to be here. He really wanted to be here. But he couldn't be here because he's where he needs to be. Right? He's not where he wants to be because he's where he needs to be. His mother-in-law is in trouble. His mother-in-law is in Florida. She's in trouble. She needs to come home. She wants to be back home with her family. So my dad is not where he wants to be. He's where he needs to be. A giant of a man. I love you, Dad. Thank you. And that's what I want to talk to you about, giants. The giants upon whose shoulders we stand. My dad was one of them, not just in my personal life, but my professional life. My dad spent 40 years on the Chicago Fire Department. Lived to tell the tale. Shoulders of giants. It's a commonly used phrase. A lot of people use it. It's been around for a long time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar titled his story about the Harlem Wrens and what they did for the National Basketball League, basketball players professional. Stephen Hawking wrote a book where he compiled all the works of the people that came before him, the scientists, the men, the Keplers, the Einsteins, the Galileos, the Copernicuses, the people that shaped the world, that we see the world the way they've showed it to us, giants that he built his work upon. And then there's this rock band, Upon the Shoulders of Giants. And they picked that name. Beats the pants off of me. I don't know. They're a rock band. They can do what they want. Right? It went really good with that graphic thing that they came up with. You know? It's been around a long time, popular phrase. Right? It's often attributed to Newton. It's actually even older than that. John of Salisbury, 12th century theologian. And what he wrote was, we are like dwarfs standing on the shoulders of giants. We see more than they, not because of our superior sight or because we are taller than they were, but because they raise us up and by their stature add to ours. I'm sure that all of us in the fire service would recognize the debt that we owe to those that came before us. All of us that are here today acknowledge as firefighters, as instructors, as officers, as leaders in the fire service, the debt we owe to the giants that came before us. It was their strength, it was their courage, not only on the fire ground, but in the courtrooms, on the picket lines, in the classrooms, on the training grounds, and in the laboratories that built the fire service we are so privileged to be a part of today. True giants. There's an interesting story about that picture that's going to come up eventually. And it's a picture of Dick Scheit. I don't know if you're all familiar with it or not, but it's a picture from the Our Lady of Angels school fire. And the picture of Dick Scheit is a picture of the first child being brought out of the Our Lady of Angels school fire. It was an iconic picture in its time. It was a very famous, very popular picture. And it reminds me of the giants in the fire service. So we'll come back to Dick and what he did and what he meant to us. You know, almost by definition, those of us who call ourselves instructors, those of us who are teachers, must be agents of change. We must be the early adopters, right? We must be the people, the advocates of the new and the different. New techniques, new strategies, new tactics. But at the same time, we must never forget, we must never, ever forget those that came before us. Those that built the fire service we are so privileged to be a part of. People like Dick Scheit. Okay? Dick was a giant of a man. We'll come back and we'll talk at the very end about Dick and the legacy he left to us. But I want you to consider for a moment what it is we owe to these giants. What it is we owe to the people that came before us and what it is they gave us. What would they ask of us? What would they want? Would they want monuments? Would they want testimonials? Would they want plaques on the wall? I don't think so. I think what they would want is for us to carry on their work. I think they'd want us to build on what they did. Giants like Dick Scheit. Giants like Chief O'Hagan. Remember Bobby talking yesterday about Chief O'Hagan and Chief O'Hagan's work? Way back in the 70s, Chief O'Hagan was doing research in the laboratory, research on the fire ground, trying to figure out a better way, a safer way to deal with high-rise fires. So we weren't hurting and killing so many of our own. And what Chief O'Hagan would ask of us today is that we build on his work, that we take what he gave to us and we expand upon it, we improve upon it, and we deliver it to the fire service, to the firefighters. Bring the science to the street. And that's what the giants of the fire service are doing today. They're bringing that science to the street where all of us can take part in it, all of us can make use of it. It's not going to be easy, is it? There's a lot of work to do. Not the least of which that's getting in the way is those darn kids. Those darn kids. They're useless. They don't care. They're not like us. They're not as good as we are. All they want to do is sit and play those video games all day long. Darn kids. What good are they to us? Every time I hear that, every time I come across somebody looking down their nose, my age, my generation, you and I, looking down our noses and saying, these darn kids today, I want to rip my hair out. Us. Those of us that came up in the 50s and the 60s. That generation, right? Never trust anybody over 30. Hope I die before I grow old. I want to be your backdoor man. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll is all my body needs. We were the generation that first called the man the man. We didn't invent the one-finger salute, but we certainly brought it to an art form. And yet, we're going to look down our noses at the kids today and say they're not good enough. How dare we? Right? We get all upset because they ask why. That's their job, is to ask why. It is our job to provide the answer. We owe that to them. You and I, we owe that to them. What would the giants that came before us ask of us? What would the giants that came before us want us to do? They'd want us to do for the next generation what they did for us, right? To carry the torch, to pass on the knowledge, to bring the next generation of firefighters and make them ready to do what they need to do. The O'Hagans, the Dick Scheids, the people like them. You know, still it's not going to be easy. Because the fact of the matter is, you are stupider and lazier than even I was. But that doesn't change the mission. That doesn't change what we need to do. On your worst day, when you don't know how to communicate to these kids, when you don't know how to reach them, when you don't understand where they're coming from, when you can't figure it out, why do you put all that hardware in your head? Remember this. Remember why they are here. Remember what brought them to the table. Why are they in the fire service? They're in the fire service because they want to be you. They want to be me. They want to be us. They want to be part of this thing that is bigger than they are. Right? They want to be part of this band of brothers. They want to know what we know. They want to do what we do. They want to see what we see. They want to rise up. They want to ride to that fire on that big blazing red chariot, battle axe and lance in hand, and jump off and make all that's right in the world again. That's what they want. And it's up to us to show them how to do that. And we can do that. There are examples all around us. There are examples like Eddie Enright. There are examples like Tom Brady. These guys, giants in the fire service, giants in my fire service, giants in my backyard. The men that led us, and they were then almost exclusively men, the men that built the fire service as we know it today, the giants of our fire service, our greatest generation. You're familiar with that phrase, right? The greatest generation. Tom Brokaw wrote that book, The Greatest Generation. He was talking about the generation that grew up during the Depression, went out and fought World War II, came back and built the strongest, freest economy the world has ever seen. We have our own greatest generation, and it's them right there. It's that generation of firefighters that came up in the 60s and 70s that really did go to 3 and 4 fires every day of their lives. And they did it with what? They did it with next to nothing. And they fought and they bled for us, for their communities. It was not just a job to them. It was not just a career. It was an avocation. That's their lesson. That's what they gave us. It's an avocation. What do we owe them? How do we meet that obligation? How do we meet that solemn obligation we have to these men and women? It's really pretty simple. We have to become giants ourselves. Maybe not that big, but giants nonetheless, right? We have to become giants ourselves. We have to be like Gary Baum, who teaches a group of high school students, high school cadet, firefighter cadets, right? We have to be people like Shay. Shay's coming up here. People like Shay Lehman, who volunteers his time as an instructor at the Illinois Fire Service Institute so his firefighters can come to class for nothing. He doesn't get paid. He gets credits that he can send his firefighters to class with. Okay? We have to be giants like the giants you come here to see today. People on the large stage. People that have the knowledge and the ability to spread the word. We have to be students of the game. More than anything else, what that generation that came before us wanted us to do is to master our craft and become students of the game. And that is our solemn obligation. To do not just that, but then to pass it along to the next generation of firefighters. I don't know if we're ready to do that, are you? I know that that's a big part of the reason why I come here. There are examples all around us. There are examples on the national stage. There are the Normans, the Salkas, the Dodsons, the Tracys, the Cirillos, the Healys, the Haltons and the Daltons, the people that we know that we come here to see and come here to learn from. Shining living examples. Be like them. Do as they do. Back home, when you come back home, you're going to have examples yourself. People like Bobby McKee, people like Keith Witt, people like Kevin Krasnick, guys I work with back home, guys who in their spare time, guys who could, really could, earn hundreds, even thousands of dollars every day instructing other firefighters. They have that kind of experience, that kind of value, that kind of knowledge. And yet they work for slave wages for the Illinois Fire Service Institute. For laborers' wages, for less than what a laborer makes, that's what they work for because that is where they are needed. There's people like Brett Graves. Brett Graves is a local hero back in Illinois. Brett has a small fire training company. You around, Brett? There he is. He's here. Brett runs a fire training company, right? He's trying to make a buck. Have you made a dime yet, Brett? I don't think so. Probably not. But he continues to do what he does, right? Because not everybody has the time and the treasure to come here. So it's Brett's mission in life to bring this to rural Illinois, to suburban Illinois. And he spends his time doing that. There are local heroes like Vicki Schmidt. Vicki Schmidt has a full-time job. Vicki Schmidt volunteers in a local fire department. Vicki Schmidt owns and operates a horse farm. Vicki Schmidt is a part-time instructor for the Maine State Fire Services. And in her spare time, Vicki volunteers her time on the Maine State Fire Commission, where she's an advocate for the adoption and the preservation of Maine's first state fire code, where she's an advocate for the rural firefighters in Maine who, like the rural firefighters in most of this country, are often left behind and forgotten. There are all kinds of local heroes that we will come back to when we leave here today, that are examples to us, that will teach us, that will show us who it is and what it is we need to be. People like Chris Hasbrook. Chris Hasbrook's not even a firefighter, though he knows how to behave like one on occasion. If it wasn't for people like Chris Hasbrook, we wouldn't be where we're at today. The research that's being done at Underwriters Laboratories is largely due to people like Chris Hasbrook, who are making that funding possible, making that research possible. People like Father Tom McCrone and Rabbi Moshe Wolf. Not firefighters, but giants in the fire service, because they are everywhere. When you come to Chicago, when you see the Chicago Fire Department, you see one of these two men. And they have full-time ministries. This is what they do in their spare time. In all our tragedies, all our triumphs, and all our extra alarm fires, and our routine day-to-day operations, you turn around and one of these men will be there for you, for us. The best of all examples of this service leadership that we need in the fire service. There are people you'll never know and you'll never see. Giants in the fire service that you don't even know their names, and outside of today, you'll never see it and you'll never know it. But if it wasn't for them, the little minuscule amount of the federal budget that comes our way and provides the research and the equipment and the manpower support that we so desperately need would not be possible. People like Catherine Patterson, Maggie Wilson, Ellen Sogolo, Dave Evans, people who work for the Assistance to Firefighters grants programs and programs like that. Without them, we could not survive. Those are the shining examples, the giants in the fire service today that we need to emulate and be a part of. I'm not so sure about you and why you come here and what it is exactly you come here for, but I know why I'm here. This is my Mecca. This is my pilgrimage. It's not just the classes. It's not just the parties on the street. Tonight we drink. Where's George? I had to be on my best behavior all week. I taught Tuesday. I taught Wednesday. I'm doing this today. Tonight we drink. All right. But what I come here for more than anything else is to immerse myself in the culture of the fire service, right? To surround myself with it, to bathe in it. And I take that home with me. And that's the energy and that's the power, right? That's the collective fire service. That is the culture of the fire service, rising me up and carrying me on its shoulder so that I can be what I can be, I can see what I can see, and I can do what I can do. One of the last things I want to leave you with is this discussion about culture. And there's always a lot of talk. There has been since I've come on the job, talk about the culture of this fire service and the need to change the culture of the fire service. Let me tell you, let me be clear, let me be brutally honest. I have no issue whatsoever with anybody who is talking about changing the culture of the fire service, because I know in my very soul, I know that they're trying to do the right thing. They want to make needed, necessary changes that have to be made for our own well-being. So I have no issue with that. But, there's always a but, right? Here's the but. I'm a little worried that the phrase changing the culture of the fire service has within it its seeds of its own defeat for a couple of reasons. First off, I don't think you really change a culture. A culture is what changes you. Right? What is a culture? That shared set of attitudes, values, goals, practices that characterizes an organization. Can we really change that, or is that something that changes us? I believe it's something that changes us, because that's what happened to me. I did not come to the fire service, even as a firefighter. Anybody can teach anybody to be a firefighter. The firefighting skills, right? They cannot teach you to be a firefighter. That's what the culture of the fire service does. It teaches us to be one. I did not come here as an instructor. I did not come here as an officer or as a leader. The culture of the fire service shaped me and made me those things, raised me up and carried me. On top of all that, think about what the culture of the fire service is. Bobby Halton speaks so eloquently about this both yesterday and today. What is that culture of the fire service? What is this thing that we're always talking about changing? I don't know about you, but my fire service is a culture of dedication. My fire service has a culture of sacrifice. It's a culture of duty. It's a culture of honor. It's a culture represented by the men you see standing before you and those of you in the audience today. Is that what we want to change? Of course not. That's not what anybody's talking about, right? What are they really talking about? They're talking about behavioral changes. For all these great and good things that we are, and indeed we are these things, there are times when we're a little too reckless. There are times when we disregard our safety to the point where we are no longer serving the people we have sworn to serve. We're a danger not just to ourselves, but the people next to us and the people we're supposed to be here to help. And it's those behaviors that need to change, because those behaviors are not consistent with the culture of the fire service. If we want to nurture that culture, if we want to preserve it, if we want to enhance it, then we're going to have to change those behaviors that need changing. That's part of living up to the expectation. That's part of living up to the solemn obligation we have to the giants that came before us, the giants that raised us up and carried us for a time. I have this really, really clear recollection. It's like it happened yesterday. Rudy Steigerwald. Rudy Steigerwald, there he is. Rudy looking right at me, he said, "Kid, you and your pals are going to ruin this job. I am so happy that I'm retiring because you and your pals are going to ruin this job." Of course, when Rudy was done, he took me back into the back room and showed me how to field strip a K-12 saw. Okay? And that is our same obligation, to do those sorts of things. No matter how stupid they are, no matter how long they've lived and how dumb they've stayed, it is our obligation to carry that next generation of firefighters, to rise them up on our shoulders so that they can see more than we can see and do more than we can do. And that brings me back to Dick Scheit. Dick Scheit's picture is everywhere in the Chicago Fire Department. That picture of Dick right here holding that child. It's in my office right across from my desk. I look at it every day. It's in the Hall of Honor at the Chicago Fire Academy. On one side of that hall is our history. On the other side is the badge of every line of duty death in the Chicago Fire Department. And at the end of that hall, rising up over your head, is Dick's picture with this phrase underneath it. These are Dick's words. Every day of your life in the American Fire Service, every day that you come to work, do this one thing. Make sure that some part of that day you devote yourself to the solemn obligation to simply leave the job a little better for the next guy. Thank you all very much. You've been very good. Have a good show. My pleasure.